Welcome to The Edge. I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Steve Bittenbender of the Gambling.com group. Steve covers the state sites for us and is the authoritative expert in our industry on legislative issues around the country, from gaming tax issues to iGaming expansion, prediction markets, all that. Steve is the expert, but he's also, as a Louisville, Kentucky resident, very knowledgeable about the horse racing industry. Last year, Steve and I did a setup for the Belmont, excuse me, and Steve got door knock correctly at a 17-1 odds. So, Steve, I want to talk to you, if we can, a little bit about
Mhm.
the future of the Triple Crown. It became a little bit of a controversy this year about the spacing out of the races. But before we do that, let's talk about the Belmont. Very dramatic, a race coming up in the midst of a very active sports season. The NHL playoffs underway, the finals with you've got Connor McDavid, Edmonton in Florida, with arguably the world's greatest hockey player, Connor McDavid, up in Edmonton. A lot of action there. You got the NBA finals with SGA at Oklahoma City against Indiana, so a lot going on there. College World Series. You went to Louisville. I went to LSU. Both of our teams are in the College World Series, so there's a lot going on now. But capped off Saturday by the Belmont, the third leg of the Triple Crown, after the Kentucky Derby, after the Preakness. The winner of the Kentucky Derby, the winner of the Preakness, and other dynamic horses are in the Belmont. Steve, set the table, if you would, about why this Belmont is so significant.
Well, the reason why this is so significant is, we had a pretty thrilling Derby finish this year with between sovereignty and journalism. Both of them came from off the pack, back in the field. Journalism made his move coming out of the turn. Sovereignty followed him, and sovereignty had probably just a little bit more energy there on and off track to pull out the win. Um, Sovereignty's connections, led by trainer Belmont, came out and said, shortly afterward, they're not going to go to the Preakness. They're going to forego the chance for a Triple Crown. Journalism decided to do that and decided to go to the Preakness, and had probably one of the more thrilling stretch runs I've seen in some time, if ever. He You can argue whether or not Umberto Rispoli, his jockey, placed him wrong, kept him inside too long, but to thread the needle like he did, have contact like he did with two horses, and come from five lengths down, in the middle of the stretch to win at the end, and that was simply an amazing job. And journalism certainly proved that he had enough stamina to you know to perform well after just the 2 week break, and now he's coming in to the Belmont on 3 weeks. Sovereignty will be coming in on 5 weeks. Beza, who finished in the Money in the Derby, will be coming in on 5 weeks as well. And then you also have a wild card in here with Rodriguez. Rodriguez is a Bob Baffert horse who was supposed to be in a Derby, but got scratched late. Then he was supposed to be in the Preakness, or they had thought about putting him in the Preakness, but they held off on doing that. So, he's arguably the freshest horse of the four, and a compelling case could be made that he could play a spoiler role there. I think most racing fans, hope to see a sovereignty journalism duel play out, and hopefully see that play out again in the summer, with the Travelers there at Saratoga, and possibly even the Breeders' Cup Classic later this year at Del Mar.
Yeah, it's funny, Steve. You mentioned I did an interview with Aaron Wellman of Eclipse Thoroughbred Partners, co-owners of journalism. He was saying, setting up potential Belmont field, mentioning that Rodriguez is the speed horse of the group, and at the time the post positions weren't known, and he was saying they hoped for a middle to outside post position, which they got. There, I think, 7 of the 8 horses. um, yeah, you've got a fantastic, as you say, the top 3 finishers in the Kentucky Derby are in this field. Everybody wants to see the journalism, sovereignty match, but as you note, there may be some sleepers in the bunch, in addition to the ones we haven't even talked about. Very dynamic field, very exciting race coming. How do you put your prediction on it? How do you see when you go to the ticket window or get on your phone and place a bet, whichever app you use? Where are you going to go? I know leading into the race, you're going to have some more information that comes out about how the horses are doing. But where would you go at the ticket window or on your phone right now?
Right now, I'm literally torn between sovereignty and journalism right now. I can make a case for either. You know, if this were the traditional Belmont and it was and it was on Long Island rather than upstate New York at Saratoga, and it was a mile and a half instead of a mile and a quarter, that to me would be in sovereignty's favor. But with it just being a mile and a quarter like the Derby, if if the track is if the track is fast, if they have good weather up in New York, I think journalism is the horse to pick, and I think he has enough power and stamina to withhold sovereignty on a fast track. That being said, I can't count out Bob Baffert. This looks like a race, especially with it being just a mile and a quarter. If Rodriguez gets out early, it could be a race where he dictates the pace, and in typical typical um, Baffert fashion, horse leads wire to wire, and no one's able to catch up with him at the end. So I will probably end up playing a couple of exotics um, with journalism, sovereignty, and Rodriguez. May throw in Hill Road as a possible, um, third place horse in the exotic. You also can't count out Beza as well, but I don't think Beza's as good as the first three I mentioned: Sovereignty, Journalism, and Rodriguez. So, you know, I think this is going to be one where where people probably should look to play the exotics. Um, you know, you know, you have sovereignty and journalism, who I think are heads above the field. Rodriguez, who I think is the biggest wild card of the bunch, and then maybe throw in toss in a couple of the long shots there, to come in third. And that could end up being end up being a decent trifecta, depending on how things set up. But you asked for a win bet. If I had to put $2 to win right now, or more than $2 to win, I would go on journalism. So
No, I'm a $2 guy, man. I'm almost exactly where you are. I'm almost exactly where you are, and I haven't done it yet, but I'm almost exactly where you are, which is probably journalism. Uh, Track was sloppy, as you know, you live in Louisville. Track was sloppy at the Derby. Um, yeah, I'm with you, and you got a speed horse like Rodriguez, as you say. If Rodriguez gets out and no, of course, I mean, as you look through all the things that have happened. Look at the Santa Anita Derby, small field, 5 horses. Look at the Preakness. Journalism came from way behind this, but as you note, Steve, and that Preakness, man, that guy, uh, journalism was way back, jammed up in horses, had a bumping incident, and just surged down the end. So you never know. Of course, a speed horse like Rodriguez might be tougher to catch up with, but man,
yeah.
I'm exactly where you are.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if Rispoli can work, to the inside. Now he's going to have Slavey and Pratt and Beza right next to him, and of course Pratt was the jockey that kind of jockeyed there with Rispoli. They bodied up against each other, traded a couple of elbows there down the stretch. So it might be interesting to see. Supposedly Pratt and Rispoli are good friends, or know each other well. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of contact there may be coming out of the gate with Beza 6 and Journalism 7. But if journalism's able to break clean and get closer to the rail, but not necessarily get into the rail, in an 8 horse field, if he's able to stay on the outside tight, then I think that's going to be the winning factor there, if he's able to do that. If he ends up getting pinned and pushed back behind horses, that's probably going to be um, too much of a challenge. I think it's hard to ask a horse to do that 3 times in a row. Considering that he did it in the Derby and he did it in the Preakness.
Yeah, I'm exactly where you are. I'm probably a $2 guy on journalism, and we'll take a look as we get closer to Rodriguez and Sovereignty. Sovereignty come from behind horse, and it's going to be really dynamic. It's been a long time since I've been look forward to a race as big as this one because of the matchup that everybody's anticipating that you mentioned earlier, which could extend into the racing season between Sovereignty and journalism. And let me ask you, Steve. So one of the things that arose about that when the Derby Runner Sovereignty didn't go to 2 weeks later, as you noticed, the Preakness held him back. His team held him back, because of the short time frame. And there's an argument that horses need more time in today's world with the training and all those things that exist in today's horse race world. There's not enough time. Derby to Preakness 2 weeks, as you know, Preakness to Belmont 3 weeks. There is an argument that some have made that there's not enough time for horses to recover to really make it a dynamic race for all three. Now, the other side of the coin is, listen, as Aaron Wellman said, it takes an all-time great to compete in all three, and that's what legends are made out of. Legends, not just horse racing, all of sports legend is in the traditional events, whether it's the World Series, March Madness. We talked about everything that's going on now, NBA finals, NHL finals. The Triple Crown is a part of the legend of U.S. and arguably global sports. It is what it is, and it does take a tough contender to go through all three with the current time frame. Where are you on that argument? It's an evolving argument, I get that, and people's views, including my own, people's views change. Where are you on the argument of, "Let's spread it out?" You spread it out and you can move it into the July 4th weekend. You can so there's a lot to do that could make it interesting. Where are you on that argument?
I I see I see the argument on both sides, and honestly, I'm I'm well, not probably. I am ambivalent on it because you ask me today, I'll tell you one answer. You ask me again next week, it's just kind of like the weather. Wait 5 minutes and it'll change. Um, you know, Yes, the way horse racing is now, it is completely different from the way that it was years ago, where horses were, it was more common for horses to run on 2 week notice or less in some cases. So that has changed, and if you've noticed, the Derby prep calendar has changed with that. They've gone to the cycle now where it's pretty much a month between. You've got your mid-major races like the Risen Star and the Fountain of Youth. Then a month later, you have your Louisiana Derby, your Florida Derbies. And then after that, you have obviously the Derby a month later. So I see the argument that it sets it up. So, you run the Derby in May, you run the Preakness either Memorial Day weekend or first weekend in June, and then you run the Belmont in early July or around the July 4th weekend. Totally see the argument in that. I totally see the value in that. Um, and it should be noted that this tradition that people talk about really has only been around for maybe a third of the time of the big three races. It's really, I think it dates back just to like the late 60s, this current calendar of the Derby being first Saturday in May, Preakness 2 weeks later, Belmont 3 weeks. Before that, it was always kind of jumbled up a little bit. So there was never really a set schedule until then. And, you know, if if you can if you can set it up that way where it goes a month, a month, a month, you probably would get more Derby horses in there, and you'd probably get more Derby horses competing in the full Triple Crown. The main issue with that's going to be, though, you've got you know, other tracks to consider here, not just Churchill, Pimlico, and Belmont when it opens here in a couple of years. You've got, you've got Monmouth Park in New Jersey, right across the river there from Belmont. You know, they run, you know, they run a huge 3-year-old stakes race in early July. If you run the Belmont at that time, you're infringing on them. You're also kind of infringing on Saratoga and the schedule they have set up for for the Travers, which a lot of people call the Summer Derby. You know, typically Belmont, I believe Belmont, with the way that the new schedule is going to be set up, they should be done by July 4th, if not earlier. So you have to ask Saratoga to give Belmont either that weekend or some additional dates, which could have an impact, on racing in northern New York. You also have the California tracks to consider as well. It's a healthy discussion. Um, as I said, I'm ambivalent about it right now. I understand that yes, it's it would be nice to have it a month, but at the same time, you know we've had this system now for over 50 years. We've had several horses at least be in a position to win it in the Belmont, even if they didn't. We've only had four that have won it in this current format. Um, I think horses can do it. I think trainers need to commit to doing it. And honestly, if a trainer like Bill Mott, if he doesn't feel his horse is suited, or if he doesn't feel his horses are suited to run 2 weeks out, that's perfectly fine. I mean, we need to take into consideration, you know, horse welfare on this, and that would be an argument to extend it out as well. But as you noted, journalism's connections have said that this is the 5 week span is truly a test of a champion, and we'll see here just how journalism fares. As I said, I think he does have enough in the tank to do this, but not every horse does. Now, of course, not every horse is or will be a Triple Crown winner. So again, so that's where I'm conflicted on it. Right now I would say, um, you know, I could see it either way. One other thing I thought was interesting about this, Secretariat, the great Secretariat and his Triple Crown run back in 1973. He and Sham, they had the duel in the Derby and the Preakness, and they were the only two horses that moved on from the Preakness to the Belmont. You got three other horses in the race in the Belmont with those two ran races after the Preakness. So Secretariat and Sham were the freshest of those horses. So again, that goes back to what I was saying earlier, where horses raced, a while back, horses raced on a tighter turnaround than they do now. So, is it, it's definitely something that I think needs to be discussed. You're not going to find consensus on this. You're not going to find um, a unanimous decision on this. And whatever, and if you do go to the, as I said, the Derby in the first Saturday in May, the Preakness either Memorial Day weekend or the first weekend in June, and then the Belmont either the end of June or July 4th weekend, whatever, you're going to have to take into consideration the other tracks, especially as I said with Monmouth Park and the Haskell, with the Travers up at Saratoga, with what the Del Mar and Santa Anita will have. There's a chain reaction there that all would be affected by this and needs to be discussed. You can't just have Churchill, Naira, and Stronach come together and say, "Yeah, we're going to do it this way." Everyone else settle it. There's going to be some other people who have to have a say in this matter too.
Those are great points, and, as reporters, it's in our DNA to see both sides of the issue, and I'm with you, there are valid arguments on both sides. The main thing is don't mess it up. It's such anytime anything new is introduced into torpedo bats in Major League Baseball, whatever, there's always an argument, is tradition being undermined, and is it undercutting what makes the heart of a champion and what makes a sports legend? And clearly the horse racing industry, you see the handle up, you see, sort of a revival of the industry. A lot of things going on with the horse racing industry, historical horse race machines to help boost the industry in different states. A lot going on. Um, but I think everyone would agree that even non-horse racing fans, non-horse racing bettors, Steve, as you know, pay attention during the Triple Crown. The Triple Crown is a World Series. It's a March Madness. It's a major world sporting event that draws enormous attention and potentially brings people into that interest world. Big horse racing, competition in Las Vegas every year that has a massive crowd, so clearly there's a lot of interest. You wanna bring new people into the sport, you don't wanna undermine a legendary sports event like the Triple Crown. More than one event then, but it's combined one event, the Triple Crown. So I think moving forward, I think you would agree, as long as don't mess up that legendary part of American sports history.
Right, and that's gonna be, I see, I see where you're coming from on this, and again, I can make that argument too that, it's been it's been 5 weeks now for more than 50 years, and, that there's really no reason why it should be changed. But then again, you know, horsemen like Mott and, some of the others will counter and say that, horses aren't, it's not natural now for these horses to run, 2 weeks out like they did, years ago. Um, I it's going to be something that's going to probably just continue to be discussed. I don't think we're going to see any changes to it. I think we're just going to see discussion and it just continue to be a discussion point year in and year out, especially if more Derby winners decide to back off on the Preakness. If that ends up being that might be the only thing that ends up forcing the issue is if you know if horses if owners and trainers for reasons other than an injury say we're not running in the Preakness, then that would probably be the straw that would require the industry to make a change. But as long as the Derby winners as long as you get most of the Derby winners committed to go to the Preakness, I don't think you're going to see a change.
Great point, because there was pushback on what happened this year.
Mhm.
Steve Bittenbender, friend and colleague, Gambling.com group, thank you so much for joining me. Bottom line, $2 or more on journalism, is that the bottom line?
That is the bottom line, and also go ahead and put a couple dollars on the Louisville Cardinals to at least make it to Omaha.
So
Uh, yeah,
so you and I are gonna have to offline do a steak dinner in Las Vegas, or something. If LSU, Louisville make it to Omaha, then end up in the finals, we'll have to have a friendly bet on our schools.
if Louisville's pitching can hold up, it was the problem that they really had all year. The pitching was kind of inconsistent, but Dan McDonnell, one of the best coaches in college baseball. Louisville kind of fallen off the last couple of years, and after they had the early exit in the ACC tournament this year, people were writing them off. But you know, Dan McDonnell has a way of winning in June, and while Louisville hasn't had the deep run in the College World Series once they've gotten to Omaha, I think if they get there this year, this very well might be the year for him and for the Cardinals.
I agree with you, and since real quickly on the College World Series, I know we're switching from horse racing, but yeah, Louisville came out of, as you know better than anyone, came out of that Nashville regional, which had Vanderbilt in it. Had That was the right state to put up a
Yeah,
dynamic fight. So
yeah, it was Wright State in East Tennessee.
yeah, and
Mhm.
Vanderbilt came in as the number 1 seed in the nation, and Louisville came out of that regional. LSU, meanwhile, Arkansas, Little Rock Valley, losing record coming into the regional, all beat LSU in one of the two final games, and then LSU came from way behind. So two good pitchers for LSU should help. Then you've got the Tennessee and Arkansas matchup at the Fayetteville. You got Oregon State out west. You got some underdogs. San Antonio's in it. Murray State's in it. Who the underdogs could make some noise if they get to Omaha. So it's a really exciting College World Series coming up. It mixed up the seeds a little bit and has some blood in it, which could be interesting.
Exactly. I think it is going to be an interesting series. You still have enough of the blue bloods in there, as you mentioned. The LSU's, the Oregon States, North Carolina
Yeah.
is still in the running as well. So there's still plenty of the traditional teams, along with some new arrivals. So yeah, whatever 8 teams end up making it to Omaha, I think it's going to be a fantastic series, and should be a joy to watch. Once they get there, this time next week.
And if LSU and Louisville make it to Omaha and end up in a final game, you and I'll have a private conversation with a little side bet.
Yes, yes, we will. And those terms can be discussed at a later date and off video. But yes, uh, we need to continue that discussion.
Thank you, Steve Bittenbender. I'm Larry Henry. Thank you for joining us on The Edge.